Welcome back to the afternoon program of the second day of the St. Gallen Symposium. I hope you enjoyed lunch and connected with at least one other generation. I have with me my wonderful colleague, William, who is a member of the 54th International Students Committee. William is responsible for the Nordics and our technical operations. William, could you please briefly introduce yourself and then give us an outlook to the next session?
Of course. Thank you, Charlotte. I'm William Röcke, currently a bachelor student in business administration at the University of St. Gallen. Like Charlotte said, I was responsible for the Nordic markets as well as the technical operations for this St. Gallen Symposium. Not to confuse with IT, we do the infrastructure at the St. Gallen Symposium and clear the burning dumpsters behind the scenes. I'm Norwegian, born in Munich, Germany, raised in Copenhagen, Denmark, and now I'm studying in Switzerland. This can be a bit confusing sometimes to explain, so usually I say I'm a European. Before we get on to the session, I would like to give you all a little bit of background information. How do different generations view the rise and fall of nations and institutions in our shifting world? This was one of the questions we asked in this year's Voices of the Leaders of Tomorrow report, a joint publication of the St. Gallen Symposium with the Nuremberg Institute of Market Decisions. Our survey of more than 800 leaders of tomorrow and 275 senior global executives found a key divide across generations centers on whose power will decline. While the leaders of tomorrow predict a relative decline of the US and Europe, senior executives expect a world where Western powers will adapt and endure. At the same time, there's a clear consensus on who will win in global influence. China, India, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, South Africa, and the broader BRICS Plus coalition. Now you might ask yourself, why is this session about rising powers so important to William? Didn't he just call himself a European? Well, ever since I wrote a paper on the topic of rising and existing major powers in high school, I realized the importance of not just looking from within the Western bubble, but also including the voices of the rising powers and those that are affected by the shifts in our world. And that is exactly what this session, More Power, More Problems, aims to do. What does it take on a more powerful, influential, global role? What responsibility? What potential, but also what challenges come with that? Our next session will engage exactly with these difficult questions. Let's welcome our panel and Sebastian Ramspeck, International Correspondent for Swiss Radio and Television, SRF, to the stage. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, SGS. Welcome to this afternoon panel. Thank you, Charlotte, William, for this very fascinating introduction. Global power is shifting. This is the theme of this year's symposium, and it couldn't summarize world politics and geoeconomics in 2025 any better. Power is shifting to what we call in the West the Global South. The Global South calls it Global South to the emerging nations, and 10 of them are in the BRICS group of countries, and 3 of them are here represented on the panel. And with that, I shift to the introduction of the panelists. From South Africa, I welcome Dr. Leon Schreiber, the Minister of Home Affairs of the Republic of South Africa, also member of the National Assembly for the Democratic Alliance Party. He was a leader of tomorrow in St. Gallen at the symposium many years ago, and he made a PhD in Berlin, Freie Universität, and also was a research assistant and senior researcher at Princeton University. So, schönen guten Tag, Herr Minister.
Dankeschön.
Wir sprechen auch ein paar Worte Deutsch, aber heute reden wir Englisch. From Brazil, I welcome Ms. Karla Godoy, from the state of Pernambucco, where she's the Executive Secretary for Sustainability in the government there. She has a background in political science, also in development practice. She's also a former Fulbright scholar, and in her current function, she leads initiatives on climate change and also on sustainability. Welcome, Ms. Godoy. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Amitabh Kant from India. He's the G20 Sherpa for India, so he's advising Prime Minister Narendra Modi on international economic diplomacy. In your previous roles, among them, you were the CEO of the leading think tank, policy think tank of India, various other positions, and you are a Chevening scholar, did your studies at Harvard Kennedy School, and are also a widely published author. Welcome to you also. Thank you very much for being here, and I must say that when we have a panelist, of course, representing the Indian government here on the panel, I must ask, before we talk about the BRICS, before we talk about trade, before we talk about demographics and also the younger generation, we have to talk about the tensions between your country and Pakistan, because it's an issue that many people are worried about, also in Switzerland. And so my question to you, are we on the brink of a full-fledged war between two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan?
Well, since you've asked me this question at a forum on geopolitics, let me put this in a perspective. On 22nd April, in a tourist spot of India called Pahalgam, 26 tourists were identified on religious grounds and shot dead in front of their wives and young children. The Prime Minister went on to say that the perpetrators of this very horrific and dastardly attack would be brought to justice. We took 2 weeks and we provided evidence, we provided intercepts, we provided all the possible linkages of these terrorists to Pakistan. No action was taken. In fact, Pakistan went on to confiscate the issue. It made accusations against India, and India went on to take action against the terrorists. 9 terrorist camps were destroyed, and we made sure that no civilian was impacted, no military site was impacted. We have a zero policy of tolerance against terrorist attacks, and in our national interest, in our national security interest, we will take action against every terror attack that takes place. India has suffered very deeply on account of terror attacks, and it will take full action against any terror attack that takes place against India and Indians.
Now, India blames Pakistan. Pakistan blames India. The Western media blames a bit both sides. What is India doing to de-escalate and to assure stability in the region in the long run? So it's not just about escalation and like fighting back. What do you do for stability in the long run?
So we believe that India has faced several terror attacks in the past, from Bombay 26/11 to Pulwama to here, one after another. We've taken action now. We don't want to escalate the issue, but if there is retaliation from Pakistan, India will take strong action against it. But at the moment, we feel that action has been taken, and we would not like to escalate the issue.
Now, India, I said, is part of the BRICS group of countries, with China, of course, and China is very much promoting this idea, this narrative of a multipolar world. And we will have some live graphics and videos during this discussion, and I would like to listen to Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, when he was in Munich at the security conference, just a few seconds, and this will bring us to some interesting topics. Please, video, can we have it?
Will multipolarity bring chaos, conflict, and confrontation? Does it mean domination by major countries and the strong bullying the weak? China's answer is, we should work for an equal and orderly multipolar world. This is another major proposition put forward by President Xi Jinping, and it represents our sincere expectation for a multipolar world.
Now, Minister Schreiber, if we look around, we see a lack of US leadership, and we see chaos and war and trade wars and tensions. We don't see any sign of a multipolar world that brings stability and peace. Or do you see it differently?
Well, I think the fact that you start the question with the actions of the US already sets the premise for us. And I think it's important just to add to the general conversation we've had here some of the points that have not been raised. We've spoken quite a bit about tariffs in some of these sessions, but I have to point out two things that are really relevant to South Africa in this whole context. The first being the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which is a free trade agreement on very generous terms for the African continent that has played an important role in the South African economy. Large agricultural exports that go to the US. And if we were to lose that access, that would have real economic consequences for my country and for the region. I think secondly, what has gone unsaid so far is the cutting of aid. And South Africa is a prime example of having to now scramble and deal with this because we have the world's largest AIDS program. It's been very successful after some years of denial. It's been a very successful intervention. But the suspension of PEPFAR has cost us 17% of the budget for that program. So in perhaps somewhat different ways from Switzerland and others, we are experiencing the consequences and the same uncertainty that you speak of. So I think the point is very clear that we're in a moment of transition. I don't think we've arrived at the multipolar world as it will look or as the stability or the order of that world will come to be defined. I think we are in some transition phase. And I think my own country is in a transition phase. We know all about this. It does have uncertainty, it does have challenges, but I think importantly, there is also opportunity. And I think if you think about it from the perspective I've just given you from South Africa, we are working hard to diversify our trade. Interestingly, we had a very good engagement with the European Union. There seems to be a renewed interest in relations between South Africa and the EU. We're hosting the G20 this year, so I'm sure we'll see some of the colleagues there as well later in the year for the big meeting. And from my perspective personally, there is also opportunity in the relations between some of the BRICS members. I'll be very selfish and say that we're working very hard on visa reform because we want more tourists from your countries and from China specifically. We are underperforming. That can help us address some of our problems. So yes, the instability is there. We're experiencing it in somewhat different ways, but there is also opportunity for us, and we need to get quite serious about addressing our own domestic issues in that context.
Let's have a look at some headlines regarding this topic from Brazil. There is a headline, China and BRICS will defend global order as Trump withdraws. Brazil says, it's like referring to the foreign policy advisor of your president, Lula da Silva. Again, you have to explain to us. I mean, Minister Schreiber said it's not yet there, but in the West, we have difficulties to see a multipolar world which brings more peace and stability than we had in the past. But you can certainly explain to us how it will happen.
Wow, that's a huge responsibility to represent the entire country. But yeah, I think that our president's vision is to, I think that what we have now is a huge opportunity to actually reshape the governance and international system that we have established. I think it's an opportunity for developing countries to actually step up and defend the policies, the trade policies, and the organizations, reforms that we need to have in place to actually have this multipolar world, to actually help all the members to succeed. And Lula is actually acting and serving, and he wants to serve as a leader in this process, not only for Latin America and the BRICS, but for the whole world. So like Trump stepping back in the United States, stepping back either for in the Paris agreements, for example. So now we have the COP taking place in Brazil. Lula has established that now we're going to take the lead and try to converge the ideas and the conversations to what is more important for the entire world. So, yeah.
Because, Mr. Kant, in the West, we see BRICS as an anti-Western group of countries. And fact is that we don't see a lot of similarities between these 10 countries. It's your 3 countries, it's China, it's Iran, it's Egypt, it's very different countries. And the only common ground is that you are anti-Western and you don't want US dominance, isn't it?
Well, let me try and put this in a perspective. Firstly, if you look at global growth, it's going to be around 2.8 to 3%. But the emerging markets are going to grow at about 4.2%. And according to both IMF and World Bank, 3/4 of the growth this year is going to come from emerging markets. And according to both IMF and World Bank, for the next 3 decades, almost 2/3 to 3/4 of the growth will come from emerging markets. And BRICS is not a geopolitical grouping. BRICS is not a trade bloc. It's an association of countries who discuss issues of growth, of climate, of digital public infrastructures, etc., which have common issues, because there are certain legacy countries where growth has already taken place. You're already 6.5 feet. You can't grow any further. But these are emerging markets which are going to grow for the next 3 decades. They have common issues of using technology to leapfrog. They have common issues of climate. And therefore, they need to discuss and learn from each other's experiences. But it's not a geopolitical grouping, nor is it a trade bloc.
Talking about trade, of course, everyone is looking these days once more to Donald Trump, and we have also his famous table on the spot. You are one of the countries, Mr. Schreiber, South Africa, with quite high tariffs threatened, like Switzerland, 30% in your case. What would it mean for South Africa, for your economy, if there was a global trade war?
Yeah. I think the timing could hardly be worse for us because we have an important opportunity in our country to actually get growth going. Mr. Kant talks about growth in emerging markets. South Africa's been a laggard on this, and we really need to address that so that we also make our contribution to this picture of global growth. Over the past decade, our population growth has outstripped our GDP growth. Last year, we grew by 0.6%, and that's just not good enough. So we've had important and really significant political change, and it's based on South Africans saying that we need to address unemployment, we need to get growth going. So we formed this multi-party government. It's unprecedented in our history, and the one thing that does unite us is the need for growth. So at exactly the moment that we have put that as our clear priority, at exactly the moment that I think there's a global renewed interest in South Africa and the prospects of the country to move forward, we've now been confronted by this shifting global power, shifting global architecture. So we are navigating it from a position we would not like to be in, and it adds to the pressure that we have domestically. I think in practical and real terms, I've mentioned to you that even without tariffs, the AGOA agreement is something that is important to us and that we would like to protect. But I also think some of the concerns that have been raised by the US administration in relation to South Africa specifically are things that we should deal with on that specific basis. There's clearly a specific interest in South Africa and some of the issues that the US has with us that we need to confront. So the president has appointed a new special envoy to Washington that is broadly respected. He's initiated some conversations. When President Zelensky visited the country recently, there was a discussion between President Trump and President Ramaphosa. So I think it's something that we have to work on very seriously, because if we add to our list of challenges the US tariffs and global trade war, then we're even deeper underwater than we need to be. And at exactly the moment that we've committed together to work together to get onto growth, to get out of some of these challenges, we are now confronted by this new threat.
Mr. Kant, there was a headline that Apple wants to move production of iPhones for the domestic US market from China to India. So for you, this global trade war in the end could be a good thing.
So Apple has moved about close to 30% of its production to India. And what it has said is that it will produce all the iPhones required for the United States from India. But more important than that is that India is a great believer in a multilateral trading order. It believed in the WTO, but given the present situation of a breakdown of the global supply chains, India is very clear that it must work with partners to arrive at bilateral trade agreements. Just day before, it had an agreement, a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. It looks forward to very expeditiously having a trade agreement with EU. If EU moves fast enough, we'll be very happy to do it much quicker and much faster than in the next couple of months. And we look forward to having we move very fast to work around a trade deal with the United States of America, which should hopefully be a win-win deal for both the countries. We are very clear that trade will drive growth, trade drives prosperity, trade enables us to lift vast segments of our population to higher levels of GDP and higher levels of per capita income. And we are great believers in trade being a driver of growth and prosperity. And we'll do everything possible to push for trade with UK, with Europe, with the United States, with every possible country.
Still a lot of optimism, Ms. Godoy, in Brazil.
That's largely because we are right now a $4 trillion economy. Last year we grew at about 8.2%. The Prime Minister's aim is to make India a $30 trillion economy by the time it becomes 100, and we feel that trade will play a very critical role.
Are you also optimistic that there will be a win-win deal? Because I think Brazil also wants to have a deal with Donald Trump.
Yeah, so I'm part of the next generation, and I try to always be optimistic. I don't know how good or bad it is, but I think that the fuzz was much bigger than actually the impact that we're going to have. Some people already say in Brazil, we have lived through a trade war before, and we are still here. Of course, the iron and steel industries are going to be the ones more impacted in the Brazilian economy, but the negotiations are still taking place. I think we have really good diplomats in Brazil to actually try to talk to the United States diplomats. But I also think that this could be a win-win situation for Brazil if we know how to be strategic with the other partnerships that we establish. So with China, with the other BRICS countries, with the Latin America, Mercosur bloc and for trade and commerce. So I think that we can also succeed from this trade war for sure.
So the trade war is a BRICS boost?
It could be if we can be strategic, if we can have a lot of dialogue, and something that you said that the BRICS is a non-Western group. Anti-Western group. I think that we do share a lot of similarities, and I think that, as part of one of the countries that is part of the BRICS community, I think that we share a lot of problems in common, and that we can find the path for solutions to those problems together, and together we're much more stronger. So it could be a boost for sure.
So we talked a lot about problems, but one thing is for sure, BRICS is very dynamic economically in the past, and it will be in the future. We have some figures, we can have a look at it. BRICS and G7 compared, that's quite impressive. And I wanted just to ask you, each of you, to do a little sales pitch of your country as an emerging nation. In 1 minute, what have you achieved in the last years, and what is your ambition as an emerging nation, an emerging economy in this world? Maybe.
Sure. So I think the first thing to say is that in a world of instability, South Africa has proven to have overcome one of the biggest tests you can ever have, and that is a peaceful transfer of power. Our democracy is maturing in ways that I think people would have found hard to believe a few years ago. We've gone through a difficult period economically, but the way in which we've had this peaceful transfer of power, this formation of this new government, the government of national unity, has really, I think, demonstrated our ability to overcome these challenges. The people of South Africa have spoken. They have said that that is not the direction they want to go. And critically, you saw no soldiers on the streets. You saw no one denying the election result. A party that had been in power for 30 years accepted that. And now the two largest parties are working together to try and get South Africa on the right track. So I think that in and of itself speaks for the inherent desire and willingness of South Africa as a state to mature and to provide that platform for investment. But I think more broadly, the opportunities in South Africa, despite the fact that we've underperformed, are enormous. If we can get some of the basic things right, if we can get our ports moving, if we can fix our railways and our electricity problems, we are a country with enormous natural resources. We are a country with a young population that is increasingly educated, and there are small but important advantages in the South African market. Something like our English accent. I hope you enjoy it, because they say it's the most neutral one in the world. We're a perfect destination for outsourcing, for call centers. We have a knowledge economy that is really bursting at the seams and ready to go and participate and play our role in this story of growth in emerging nations. So I think that of course, the onus is on us, the onus is on the government to make things better, to make investment easier. We've spoken about visas already, but I know that's one of the big things holding us back. These are the reforms we're working on. And if we can get those things moving, I think South Africa is one to watch in coming years.
Ms. Godoy, Brazil, what are your achievements and ambitions as an emerging nation?
I think that as a climate activist and as a development practitioner and as a representative of my demographics, I think that I see that Brazil has a huge opportunity to actually reindustrialize the country in the blue and green economy. And we have the resources, we have technology, we are developing the nation and the education system to actually be able to do that. So it's a huge opportunity to reduce inequalities within the country and actually contribute to reducing climate change and the biodiversity loss for sure.
Finally, India.
So India is the fourth largest economy, but one of its biggest achievement has been that in the last decade, it's been able to lift 250 million people above the poverty line. And the biggest achievement has been the huge technological transformation through the use of digital public infrastructure. Every Indian has a digital identity. We do fast payments. Every Indian has a bank account, which is linked to digital identity and the mobile number. So we do our fast payment. We do 50% of the fast payments on the mobile in the world. We do stock market transactions, we do insurance, and we do credit, all on the mobile within 30 seconds to 1 minute, on the go anywhere, and it's open source, open API, globally interoperable model, where the data is owned by the citizen. This doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, only India does it. And therefore, the Bank of India International Settlement said that India achieved in 7 years what it would have taken 50 years to achieve. So India did massive amount of technological pole vaulting.
Now this brings me to the second part of the discussion, demographics, the younger generation, and I want to stick with India because you replaced China as the most populous country in the world. In these years, we don't know exactly on what day, but it is now the case. And I ask myself, is this a cause for concern or celebration?
So let me just say that the average age in India right now is about 28 and a half. Even when we become 100 in 2047, the average age of India will be 35. Europe is aging, Japan is aging, the United States is aging, India has very young demographics, they have very low dependency burden, and rarely does a country not create wealth when it has such a young population. And we will be providing 30% of the skilled manpower to the world by 2035. And therefore, I believe that this is a huge demographic dividend. It's not a demographic disaster. This will prove to be the biggest boon for India.
You see it the same way because South Africa also has a very young population. Still,
Yeah.
you're not like in the next phases of development. Is this an advantage? Is it a disadvantage? What is the challenge?
I think it is an advantage provided we get some of those basics right that I've been talking about. I think the one difference and the one reality we have to face in Africa more broadly as well is that when you have unemployment with such a young population, then you start having social challenges and there are risks. So that is why I think we go back to the point that growing the economy in Africa, creating employment is the single most important goal that we should all share. I think, just to add on to an earlier discussion, the opportunities for the African Free Trade Agreement are also now more urgent because of what we're seeing globally. And that is an agreement that has the potential to open intra-African trade in a way that's never been done before. I think things like, basic things again, like your border procedures, the fact that it's more difficult to trade within Africa than to trade around the world from Africa, those are the kind of things that we can address. If we do that, there is no doubt that the demographic dividend will also in our region be an advantage. And I think the point about demography has been also, again, a theme throughout this conversation. And as much as there is anxiety about these shrinking populations and what that means for immigration and pensions and other things like that in the West, in another part of the world, it's the opposite situation. There's a huge opportunity to harness this. I think the proviso is important, however, that if you have massively growing populations, that you have to have the economic reform that goes along with that to create opportunities. If you do that, I think that it's obvious that growth is going to come from those places.
I said earlier that you have very different countries in the BRICS community, and one good example is that from a demographics point of view, Brazil is a Western country. If I look the figures right, you are already next step.
Yeah.
You already are confronted with the same problems as we are in Switzerland, aren't you?
Yeah, we have an aging population. But again, I'm an optimistic girl, and I think that we can not change that, but we can invest in education, technology, and again, in emerging industries, so we can use that to our side, for sure.
Now I know that here in St. Gallen, cross-generational dialogue is a very important topic, and so we prepared another graphic showing something, comparing the median age in your countries with the age of head of state or government. And in all of your three countries, we see a huge gap. And of course, as a proud Swiss, I want to say the gap is a bit smaller in Switzerland.
Because
what does it say? What does it say about the power and the implication of the younger generation in your countries? I start with you, Mr. Kant.
Well, I would say that Prime Minister Modi is very, very youthful.
I would say that about me.
You say 74 there, but he's actually 25 into 3. So he's very, very spirited. He has a huge love for technology. He's more tech savvy than any one of us, any youngster. He's very effective through his ability to communicate with the citizens directly. He's very progressive as far as growth and progress is concerned, and he's willing to carry out very strong structural reforms in India's economy. He's focused very heavily on ease of doing reforms. He's focused very strongly on abolishing 1700 laws. He's done everything possible to drive India's growth story. So he remains a very young, charismatic leader with a very vibrant mindset.
Ms. Godoy, we talked before, and you said, I can mention your age. You are 28, so you're very young, but you said it's not that easy to have a high government position at your age in Brazil.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not as someone from that age, and also being a woman, it's always like really hard in any place. But also, I would say the same thing about Lula. I mean, he might even want to run again next year. If it's good or not, well, it's up to him. But as the representative of that young generation that you're talking about, and as a climate activist and trying to build and actually have a world worth living in the future, I used to hold a grudge against the last generation because it wasn't really easy for me to understand why we haven't had that much action during in the climate change agenda. I am part of that generation that in 1995, when we had the first conference of the parties, people would say, yeah, what kind of world we're going to leave to our children. And well, I was one of those children. I wasn't even born in 1995, and I'm here. But last year, during COP, I had the opportunity to talk to Cristiana Figueres, which was one of the women responsible for the Paris Agreement. And she was like, Karla, this feeling is not going to serve you or the world or that agenda any good. So what you got to do is to work with these people that are still in power, because this generation still holds a lot of power in governments and industries, economies, and work with them to find the path to have that work that you want now for your children, now that you are going to live in 2050, that I hope I'm going to be alive and really youthful, just like Lula. So yeah.
So, Minister Schreiber, you are very young too, 36, became minister in 35, and I did some research. You are not the youngest minister in your cabinet.
Yeah.
Is that just because you two are very brilliant, or is there something about South Africa and your society?
Yeah, so I think, let me start by saying I don't think any individual identity marker is deterministic of whether someone is a good leader, so age or race or gender or whatever. I think in general, that would be my view. However, there are obviously nuances to that. I think, again, this question reinforces what I said about where South Africa is as a society, the maturation, the change and growth that is genuinely going on there. Includes things like what happened in the recent election, where, in fact, the entry of other parties into this coalition brought with it a very youthful component. There are at least the 6 colleagues from my party are all under the age of 50, I think perhaps with one exception. 3 of them are under the age of 40. And so there has definitely been a generational shift in the executive as far as South Africa is concerned. And as much as I say it's not deterministic of who is a good leader, I have to cite my own experience for where age is relevant. And I really feel this very strongly with the Department of Home Affairs, the Interior Ministry, and just on the basis of what I found there, the way that things were being done was being done as if we were still 30, 40 years in the past. It's all paper-based, it's manual, it's queues, etc. And the big change that we're making at Home Affairs is very much based on Aadhaar and some of the Indian experiences. So what Mr. Kant describes there is exactly the kind of work that we are now doing. And I would say to a large extent we are doing that work because to a 36-year-old person it's quite obvious that you should be able to use a smartphone to transact with your government the same way that you would already do with your bank or other institutions, and that you should not have to fill in forms and stand in long queues. So I think in that sense it's relevant, but I think it's quite interesting looking at that graph. I'm half the age of the president, and we sit around the same cabinet table, and I think that is a good thing for South Africa.
And the good thing is that the median age in this room is also on a reasonable level. So I would like to encourage you, old and young, to ask questions to our 3 panelists. Would like to ask to know who breaks the ice. Please state who you are, your name, and to whom the question is addressed so that we can take as much possible questions. Please, the gentleman there, I see.
Thank you so much. Maximilian Skopin, former member of the ISC. We saw a beautiful picture of the BRIC countries here, but I haven't heard anything about Russia. We're talking about the future. I don't know, it's maybe late to start to bring this into the discussion, but I would be very interested to know what your countries are planning for the future with Russia in the next 5 to 10 years. Are you discussing this within your cabinets? What your positions on this? Maybe in a very brief comment, what your thoughts are about this. Thank you so much.
From all the 3, you have a very good relation to Russia, which is very shocking for many people in Europe.
So we've had a historical relationship with Russia, largely because the West at that particular point of time was not very keen on working with India. And Russia throughout supported us in very many challenges which India was confronted with at that particular point of time. We believe in multi-alignment. We are a partner of Quad. We work very closely with the United States. We work with Japan. We work with Australia. We work with Europe. And we believe that whatever we do should be in the national interest of India. And therefore, even during the Russia-Ukraine war, I must say that India continued to buy Russian oil, and much of that oil was processed and was bought by the European countries. And if India hadn't done that, the prices of oil would have hit the roof, and India would not have been able to provide livelihood to its citizens. And inflation would have hit India in a very major way. So we believe that whatever we do, we should not become parts of groupings in different areas. We should do what is in the interest of India. We should do what is in the interest of the world. And that is what India believes in. We work with the United States, we work with Europe, we work with Russia, we work with every single country, including all our BRIC partners.
Is there another question from the audience? There is a question over there.
Here. Thank you.
This side too, yeah, but then there, okay.
There's one here too.
Here? Yes, please, go ahead. But you need, I'm sorry, I did not see that. Okay, there is already a lady, sorry.
A
Please,
very good evening. This is Hema Prem, and I'm from London. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be here. What an energetic panel indeed, particularly to you, Mr. Kant, and this is a question to you. In your experience leading these transformation initiatives in India, particularly as the G20 Sherpa, very fantastic initiative indeed. What are, in your belief, the biggest institutional challenges or barriers, or I would say mindset barriers in implementing such bold reforms? And what is that you have as a message for young leaders like us to overcome them?
So I think, the challenges for all emerging markets, all emerging countries which are going to grow at rapid rates in the coming years. And that is, when the western part of the world, the United States, Europe, you were growing, when they were manufacturing, they were industrializing, they carbonized the world. It's important that when India, South Africa, Brazil grows, they must become the first country in the world which should manufacture and industrialize through a process of decarbonization. And therefore, sustainable growth will be very critical for all of us. And that, to my mind, will be a very critical learning lesson for all of us.
We would have time for one last question, if you have a short question. Can we take it over? Oh, Dan, okay, there, yes.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Milan, and I'm from Nepal. My question will be for Mr. Amitabh Kant. India has seen massive development in the past few years, but for even India to grow and keep growing, regional stability and development is going to be a key factor. What is India's development policies in regional terms?
Well, India's ambition is that it has set out a vision for itself, that from a $4 trillion economy, which grew at about 8.2% last year, it should grow at consistent rates of 8 to 9% per annum for the next 3 decades and go on to be a $30 trillion economy by 2047. And that means the challenge for India is to make its GDP grow 9x, its manufacturing about 16x, and that would mean that you need to carry out huge structural reforms. You need to have trade relationships, trade agreements with different parts of the world to be able to export. And you need constant ease of doing business to be able to manufacture at very low cost and to build world-class infrastructure, which is what India has done. So if you look at the last 7-8 years, India has built about 40 million houses for its citizens, which is more than the population of Australia. It's provided gas connection to over 120 women in India who used to make their food on cooking on firewood and transform their lives, which is more than the population of Germany, and it has provided piped water connection to 253 million Indians, which is more than the population of Brazil. So that is the size and scale of transformation which India is carrying out. And it's important for India to do this because India's size and scale, we must understand, is bigger than 23 countries of Europe, plus another 30,000 kilometers. So when it makes a difference to the lives of 1.4 billion people, it is not only transforming the lives of Indians, but it is transforming the lives of next 4 to 5 billion people of the world who are going to move from poverty to middle class in the next 2 decades.
So with this second sales pitch for India, unfortunately, we are coming to an end. You did a fantastic job. Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. It was an exciting discussion, much too short, of course, as always. Thank you very much. A special thanks to the symposium, to you, the audience.